By. In the meantime, Republicans in Congress are grappling with ways to try to fulfill a key Trump campaign promise and a longtime goal, repealing and replacing Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. Lawmakers are divided, though, right now over how quickly to get rid of the law and what to replace it with. Let's talk about that and much more. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul is joining us. Senator, thanks as usual for joining us.
Thank you.
I know you've come up with a good plan from your perspective. Other Republicans have come up with what they regard as good plans to replace Obamacare. There are probably half a dozen or a dozen plans out there. But now all of a sudden, President Trump is saying, you know what, we might not be able to replace Obamacare until 2018, until next year. How frustrated are you by talk like that? It could take a lot longer, not only to repeal, but replace Obamacare.
I think it would be a big mistake to wait. I think we should vote on replacement the same day that we vote on repeal. We've had 6 years to complain about Obamacare. We've got a lot of good ideas. I've brought together a consensus package of the things that every Republican agrees with. I put it in one package, an Obamacare Replacement Act, and we plan on introducing it the same day. We want to vote the same day. Now, what I would say is that when you vote on reforms, when you vote on replacement, it may be that the effects of the legislation take a while to create new opportunities in the marketplace. So it may well take a while for the replacement bill to have an effect. But we absolutely should not wait a year to introduce a replacement bill. That is a terrible, terrible idea.
Have you had this conversation directly with the president?
Well, yeah, the last time we talked, he said he was in favor of replacing at the same time. Now, there are certain things we can't guarantee. We can't guarantee when the effects occur. We also can't guarantee that any Democrats are going to be willing to work with us. We're actually actively looking for Democrats to work with us on making health insurance better for the country, making health care better. But we're not having a lot of luck. There's a lot of angry people around here that can't get over the election. So I am hopeful that Democrats will calm it down to a lower level and that they will work with us. But absolutely, if I talk to the president again, and when I talk to my leadership in the Senate and leadership in the House, I tell them it's absolutely imperative we vote the same day on replacement. And the replacement should not be another government program. It shouldn't be Obamacare light. It should be market reforms to allow less expensive insurance to more people, help them save for it, and help individuals to join associations so they can get cheaper price and more guarantees in their insurance.
All right, let's talk about another key issue right now. The Senate votes later today on the nomination of Senator Jeff Sessions to become the Attorney General. Last night, Senator Elizabeth Warren was rebuked, banned from the debate after criticizing Senator Sessions. Democrats say Republicans miscalculated. Listen to Democratic Congressman Jim Himes.
As a political matter, if Mitch McConnell wanted to further activate an already activated Democratic activist wing, boy, did he ever do that last night.
Do you believe, Senator, and I know you're a strong believer in free speech, that Senator Warren should have been rebuked and shut down by the majority leader?
Well, I think a lot of people on the other side of the aisle are still very unhappy about losing the election. And I think their frustration is boiling over into ad hominem, basically character assassination. And I don't think it's fair to Jeff Sessions, to say that he's against voting rights. I've seen the pictures of him marching in Selma with John Lewis in favor of voting rights. So for someone to mischaracterize who he is, to attack his character, to assassinate his character, I don't think that has a place on the Senate floor. And if you look back through, I've talked for 13 hours at a time without condemning anybody. When I talk about President Obama, the previous president, I did it with respect. And so I think we can have respect the way we treat each other. We can have differences of opinion, but I think a lot of this is about people on the other side of the aisle they're just not coming to grips with the fact that they lost the election, and they're very unhappy, and so they're lashing out at everyone. And really, it just isn't fair. I mean, Republicans, as much as anyone, we do believe in voting rights. I do believe in voting rights, and it's just not fair to assassinate someone's character and say something that's not true.
But simply reading from a letter from Coretta Scott King, a letter that was written in the 80s when he was then himself being considered for a federal judgeship, was that inappropriate from your perspective?
Well, you can say anything you want when you're not on the floor. On the floor, we have special rules, so it isn't really about freedom of speech or First Amendment. It's about decorum, and we ask people to be polite to each other on the floor. most of the time you're not supposed to refer to anybody by name on the floor. Now, this is kind of an extraordinary situation because he is running for another office. It's kind of hard not to mention his name, but you're typically not supposed to mention Republican, Democrat, or individual's name on the floor. It's this way of trying to allow us to reach compromise by not making things so acrimonious that we're at each other's throat all of the time. If someone mentions your name on the floor, the rules of the Senate allow you to come back and you have privileged time to respond to that as well. So I don't know. I think there's a way we could debate this. I did hear the letter. I was sitting in there this morning and heard the letter read, and it is simply someone's opinion from events that happened a long time ago. And, it's part of the congressional record, so I think we can differ about it, but I think when we present things like this, we ought to be aware that people take it personally if you say that you're, against people, or that you're a racist, or that you're against voting rights. That is a character assassination, and I think unfair.
Let's talk about foreign policy for a moment. You're a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. We're told that Elliott Abrams is now a leading candidate to become Deputy Secretary of State, the number 2 position under Rex Tillerson. He's met with the new Secretary of State. We're told you're a member of the committee, but you have come out strongly against Abrams. Why?
Well, I think President Trump should pick somebody who agrees with President Trump. One of his loudest critics throughout the campaign was Elliott Abrams. When President Trump said, nation building abroad, we don't have the money to do it, we need to build our nation here at home, I really support that. I support President Trump's vision for nation building at home and not nation building abroad. But when Elliott Abrams was asked about this, he said, absolutely, the president is wrong. Elliott Abrams went on further to say that the chair that Washington and Lincoln sat in, that Trump wasn't fit to sit in it. It was very, very personal with regards. He was a never-Trumper. Even in the end, when Donald Trump was the nominee, Elliott Abrams was still a never-Trumper. And I just don't see a never-Trumper. Maybe they should never be in the State Department. But I think particularly since they don't agree with President Trump's vision of nation building is a mistake, regime change is a mistake, Iraq war was a mistake. Elliott Abrams was one of the chief architects of the Iraq war. Also, he was convicted of lying to Congress. We have to have people in the executive branch who will listen and understand that they work for the people and that they work under the direction of the Congress. No war is to be initiated without the approval of Congress. That's in the Constitution. And yet, Elliott Abrams was involved in covert wars, supplying weapons, taking money from the Sultan of Brunei, buying weapons and selling weapons in Iran, and then taking the proceeds of that and giving it to authoritarians in Nicaragua. So yeah, that's all a little bit scary that people are willing to go against the will of Congress. Congress had prohibited this behavior, and they were doing it anyway in secret. I don't think that bodes well for somebody that would have so much power.
Senator, what do you say to those who say he was a senior official under President Reagan? He was implementing President Reagan's policies in Central America. He was a senior official under President Bush. He was implementing President Bush's policies. And he has had a pretty distinguished career in the Council of Foreign Relations and elsewhere. And if the president likes him, even though he was so critical of the president, what's wrong with bringing in a critic?
Well, if President Trump was telling us that he didn't like nation building, why would he want somebody to run the State Department who's for nation building? If President Trump said the Iraq War was one of our biggest mistakes in recent decades, why would he want somebody who was an architect of this? I don't buy really that Elliott Abrams was just listening to Ronald Reagan and Iran-Contra. I sort of believe that maybe they were running their own war with or without the president's knowledge, to tell you the truth. And I don't want a government within a government. I don't want a secret government that's waging secret war without the permission of the people. Our founding fathers didn't want this. I don't believe Donald Trump wants that. So all I would caution is that he ought to be very wary about picking someone who has their own agenda, and it's an agenda diametrically opposite and opposed to everything President Trump has said he's for. So I don't see how they fit together, and I'm hoping it doesn't happen.
And if he's nominated, you will not vote to confirm him? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I can't vote. I mean, he was convicted of deceiving Congress. I can't vote
for someone.
But
he was pardoned at the end by President Bush.
Pardon doesn't always mean you're not guilty. It just means you have friends in high places. So I would say that lying to Congress is a big offense. When you have to have, oversight and you have to have separation of powers, one part of government checking another, if the executive branch appoints someone who has a history of lying to Congress, that doesn't bode well for oversight.
Senator Rand Paul, thanks as usual for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we're told the White House briefing